Welcome back to Hardball. In Philadelphia right now, the trial of an abortion doctor charged with the murder of babies that prosecutors say were born alive is generating national headlines. Of course, it was page 1 of today's USA Today with the headline, "Gruesome Testimony Renews Debate Over Abortion." Well, I'm not sure about that, but it is gruesome testimony. A grand jury report released in 2011 called the clinic a house of horrors. But the bottom line remains, this is a murder case. Let's keep our heads around that. Originally, Dr. Kermit Gosnell was charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder for killing babies that were allegedly alive, born alive, and viable. Well, today, a judge threw out 3 of the 7 murder charges. The judge did not explain his reasoning, but reports have indicated he did not hear sufficient evidence that the 3 babies he took out were actually born viable and then killed. Well, Gosnell is also charged with 3rd-degree murder in the 2009 death of an abortion patient. He's accused of overdosing during the procedure. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty for Gosnell in the death of the infants. Joining me right now is radio talk show host and MSNBC contributor Michael Smerconish and Ilyse Hogue, who's president of NARAL Pro-Choice America. I just want to put a couple of things in perspective, Michael, and you are the lawyer from Pennsylvania. You know your stuff, and you know this case. Ever since 1976 in Pennsylvania, we've only had 3 executions for murder 1. So this is a unique case, the fact we're even talking about it. Michael, put it in that perspective, the fact that we're already talking about capital punishment in this case.
Well, the important thing to keep in mind is that in Pennsylvania, we have the death penalty on the books, but we don't really mean it. In those 3 instances, the only 3 cases where a death sentence has been carried out, each of those defendants, they asked for it. They waved the white flag and they said, bring on that punishment. So it exists, but really it's a fiction. Still, Chris, I don't need to tell you how significant it is that a medical practitioner would be facing, at least at the outset of the trial, 7 counts of first-degree murder. First-degree murder meaning that the prosecution is saying with malice aforethought, he intended to kill viable babies. And as you point out, 3 of those were now tossed by the judge, who didn't explain his rationale, but presumably because he believed that the prosecution had not met its burden. And so just as the defense is getting underway, he removed those elements from the jury's consideration.
Now, these were abortions which resulted in a baby being born alive and then killed. It wasn't like they died on the gurney. They were killed by what procedure? It was with a knife, right?
Well, that's according to the prosecution now. The prosecution says that the spines were actually snipped. Now, at least, and that's, you know, it's the most heinous, grisly of testimony that you could imagine, but that's what the prosecution maintains. Why else would the spines have been snipped except to kill those babies upon delivery? The defense says that's not true. There were not sufficient signs of life. These babies were not born alive, and at least with regard to 3 of the 7 counts, they convinced the judge to pull that from the case.
What do you make of this, without getting into the legal aspects? Well, it is the legal aspects, the question of this very late-term abortion here. I understand Roe v. Wade. The 3rd trimester requires a real condition of health, concern about the health of the mother. And it has to be real, obviously. This guy, I wouldn't, based upon what I've seen, would not be the one you'd rely on for a judgment of any quality. That this guy is involved in late-term abortions, and according to these allegations, he was running a lousy place, unhealthy and horrible. Your view on it as a pro-choice person?
No one more outraged by this than me personally, and certainly our organization works every single day to make certain that women are not victimized by people like Dr. Kermit Gosnell, if you can even call him a doctor as these allegations come to light. What we need is safe and legal access to medical care for women seeking abortion. This is not what was happening. As you say, if the allegations prove true, this guy was operating illegally by every state books, by the federal law. He was not operating legally. The thing that has allowed the people like Dr. Gosnell to continue is unnecessary restrictions on women going to the safe clinics with reputable medical care, and that's what we stand for.
But there's also Supreme Court ordered 3rd trimester restrictions, which are legitimate restrictions.
Oh, absolutely. And it's important for your viewers to know, Chris, that these later term abortions, as we call them, are less than 1%.
No, they're 18,000 a year. I did the math.
Yeah.
Well, that's, you can do the percentages. 18,000 is not an insignificant number.
It's not an insignificant number, but when you look at the women seeking this kind of care, it is an extremely small portion of them. It is among the most difficult decisions that women face.
Well, apparently not for him.
Not for him, but for the women, right? These are women who, nobody is 6 months pregnant and all of a sudden changes their mind, right? In the vast majority of these cases,
one of these babies who was born alive, I have to be careful here, was 19 inches long.
Yeah, in many of these cases, these are women who intended to have these pregnancies, wanted to carry the babies to term when we're talking about later term abortion, and there is a significant medical reason that they were terminating this pregnancy.
Let's go to Michael. You've got a great new show on Sirius XM. I was over there. What an operation, by the way. Give me a sense of how people are reacting on both sides of the divide. I know you have a tremendous audience among the suburbs, which tends to be pro-choice generally. What's been the reaction to this? Because this is something that gets to you. Everybody in our office, all the producers, mostly women, are appalled at this. They can't even read these articles. It's so tough. I had a hard time reading it. It's beyond belief that there was something going on like this without getting into the testimony questions. If it's even like this at all, it's horrible. Your thoughts?
Well, I think you just put your finger on something. Well, everybody is approaching this, frankly, to suit their own objectives. You know, the arguments from both ends of the political spectrum, they see which element of this they think suits their particular goal. And they're all alleging bias in terms of the way in which it's being covered, to which I respond, the only bias that would be proper in this case is somehow a bias toward governmental ineptitude. Because at its core, when you get beyond the grisly facts, if you can, there were any number of state agencies, Chris, that should have shut this guy down more than a decade ago, and they didn't. And that's deserving of some real circumspection. So that's what I think this case is about, and it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out. He's got a very street-smart, Philly guy lawyer. Jack McMahon is his name. He's a former prosecutor. And Gosnell, who I once sued successfully, it'll be interesting if he takes the stand, because on a personal level, and believe me, I'm not defending him nor his conduct, but he will not come across as the Frankenstein that all of this evidence suggests.
Well, that doesn't mean he isn't. But let me ask you this about, we've argued this, we're pro-choice in many ways. In fact, we talk about it here a lot in that vein. You have states where they've really shut down an opportunity for a woman to have a real choice. She has to drive to another state, or a girl even has to drive to another state. Let me get back to Ilyse. And here you have a case where you have states like the Dakotas, or places where it's really hard to get a clinic. And here you have a clinic operating like whatever, without getting into, incriminating it, but it seems terrible. So we have states that are too sloppy, that don't regulate at all, and then we have states that regulate to death.
Yeah, I think...
Is that true? It looks like it.
I agree with Michael. This is not a problem of regulation. It was a problem of enforcement in Pennsylvania. But it's important to understand, NARAL Pro-Choice America gave Pennsylvania an F because they have put up roadblock after roadblock year after year. They're not yet...
So explain the difference between regulation being too strong and enforcement being too weak.
We believe that the women's needs are best served when abortion is regulated the same as any other medical procedure. They need to be safe, they need to be performed by reputable clinicians, and they need to be clean, right? None of these things were happening.
I'm with Hillary Clinton. Safe, legal, and rare. Thank you very much, Michael Smirkanis. It's always good luck with the program you're on right now. Sirius XM, it's where it's at. Anyway, Ilyse Hogue, thank you for joining us on NARAL Pro-Choice.